It's story time. I'm John Harris from smallballsuccess.com. I've just done a demonstration and I found out that when I do these things, it's best to do the narrative part afterward, and then you can splice it in and introduce the demonstration. Sometimes I can't get the demonstration to demonstrate what I want it to, but I kind of muddled my way through it. So here's the introductory part. This is F.C. Lane's book that's simply called Batting. Is it hitting or batting? This came out in the mid-1920s. It's batting, yes. And it's a terrific, I think maybe I paid 99 cents for a Kindle download. And he has interviews with a lot of players who were post-dead ball. Of course, at Small Ball Success, we really specialize in dead ball before Babe Ruth. But Babe Ruth is featured prominently, and Rogers Hornsby and some of the great hitters of the 20s. But Cobb and Speaker and Collins and Hannes Wagner, a lot of the guys, Jake Dobert, and guys of the teens and 20s, the early 1900s before the 20s are featured as well. Now here's a comment from the chapter called Pulling the Unexpected. This is a direct quote. That this alert, original attitude may be an important factor in a batter's success is indicated by Urban Shocker. What a great name for an old school baseball player. He said, quote, "The secret of Ty Cobb's success as a batter was the fact that he always established a mental hazard. He was always on the offensive, and you never knew exactly how to guard against him. Sometimes he would choke up on the bat and punch a hit through the infield. Sometimes he would swing from the handle and slug. Sometimes he would bunt. The only thing you could depend upon in his case was the fact that he would give you something that you weren't expecting." Now, this really made me stand up and take notice, because I ran across that theory of Cobb's hitting, and specifically his hand spreading, in Charles Leehrsen's terrific book called Ty Cobb, A Terrible Beauty. And I'll always be grateful to Leehrsen for that book, because he redeems Cobb from this ridiculous accusation that he's this rabid racist and other preposterous slanders that the man is, let's face it, he's not around to rebut these days. I forget the name of the man who supposedly, he did interview him, but he didn't publish the book based on those interviews until decades after Cobb and all of Cobb's peers had died. So there was no one living, that was convenient, who could call this guy out as a liar. And I'm glad I can't remember his name at the moment, because I don't want to publicize it. But the terrible movie called Cobb that ESPN used to run was based on that book. I love Tommy Lee Jones as an actor, but it was a terrible movie. Cobb was not any of those things. But it sold copy. Now, Leehrsen, however, good for Leehrsen for clearing all of those slanders up. But Leehrsen also promulgates this idea that the hand spreading in Cobb was just kind of a gimmick to keep the fielders guessing. He wouldn't really swing the bat that way. He'd choke up if he wanted to slap at the ball, or he'd go down here if he wanted to be a slugger. And I always thought that was much later writers guess at what Cobb was doing. In the first case, by the way, we have photographic evidence that that's not true. We can actually see not only still photos, but what live footage there is of Cobb swinging a bat shows us that the space stayed between the hands until he finished, and if it was a hard swing, the top end would come down on the bottom hand. But, and you know, in the second place, there were umpteen other players going back into the 1880s and before who also spread their hands, and they weren't all trying to fool the fielders. I doubt that any of them was. There were reasons that we talk about so many other places on Small Ball Success for hand spreading. Not going to go through those now, but the fact remains with this quotation from Batting, from F.C. Lane's book, that we have a contemporary of Cobb's, Urban Shocker, who he corroborates the claim of Charles Leehrsen. So what am I going to do with that? There's someone of the generation who said, yeah, that's what Cobb did. Well, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I am going to try to demonstrate this in what follows, what I've already done. And the first sequence is going to show you the hands spread, and I'm going to, let me move this back a little so I can do a little demonstration right now without killing my camera. I think what's going on there is that Cobb is actually stepping forward in the box and getting on top of the plate and pulling the pitch. Now, okay, Tris Speaker was the guy that we know really moved around a lot in the box routinely, but we know from testimony that Cobb did too. He doesn't necessarily even have to have done the step in his load, but he wouldn't fool the fielders as much if he didn't. So I think sometimes he probably did just take, and what I'm doing in my demonstration, taking a little step right into the plate, and then I'm going to open up and try to pull the ball, and I succeed in doing it pretty well for not having practiced it more than I did. Actually, the best contact I got was right up the middle, but still, this I think is what Cobb would do. He would sneak up on the plate and then come open and ambush the ball, and naturally, since he's trying to pull it and trying to pull it hard with this swing, his top hand is certainly going to come down on his bottom hand, and a guy in the other dugout like Urban Shocker is not going to see. It's also fast, and there are no videos to review it. He's not going to see what's happening until the swing is over, and he sees the top and bottom hands joined on the bottom of the bat, and he figures, well, Cobb did that before he started his swing. And then the other second sequence that I'm going to show you is, I'm going to take the little hop again because that's what I'm used to, but I'm going to bring the bottom hand actually up a little before I swing. And I think Cobb was indeed just trying to punch the ball lightly the other way. I don't think he necessarily would have done this routinely, trying to go the other way. This is more for weak contact. It's almost like a quasi-bunt. It's when you just want to make sure that you get the ball down on the opposite side. And the bottom hand now is really out of play. It's not, as we've explained on our site, if you leave it down here, it can lever the handle of the bat while the top hand is driving through. There's a lot of power in that. Well, you don't want power if you're trying to just punch the ball to the other side. So I suspect the bottom hand here, it slipped up. It was very, very loose. This was not even a complete swing. The bottom hand was pushing as the top hand pushed, and we're just trying to get the ball out there to the left side for whatever reason, advance the runner or something. Most of this contact was not very, if I were using a real ball on a real baseball field, it wouldn't have been driven into the gap. It didn't have that much power, but it's something that Cobb might have done just to sort of punch the ball to the other side. I don't know how else to reconcile all of these conflicting data except what I'm suggesting right here, because again, we can see video. We know from still shots that Cobb, he had the hand spread through contact, and then they came down later, perhaps, if he were swinging real hard. What Charles Leehrsen says and what Urban Shocker confirms, that's not the whole story. It could have been part of the story some of the time, but it's not the whole story of how Ty Cobb hit. So that's what I'm going to proceed to try to demonstrate.